By a really interesting, strange coincidence today, one of our loyal listeners asked me for an update on a gun control issue involving one of our candidates who's running for Congress. So this is actually a good day to get into that because this particular race, District 2, gun control has been an issue. This is the one featuring incumbent Democratic Congressman Ron Barber and his challenger, Republican Martha McSally. My caller wanted to know where they stand on that issue and where's that all shaking out. So this has been a sore point in this campaign, gun control. Now, a few weeks back, you may remember I did a little reporting on a controversy that was going on at that time involving an attack ad that had been aimed at Martha McSally, the Republican challenger. And the person behind that attack ad, basically the PAC, Political Action Committee, behind that attack ad, was the Political Action Committee associated with former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. She had run this ad attacking Martha McSally on the gun issue. McSally, you may recall, objected strenuously. She called the ad a lie, a disgrace, vile, disgusting, all those things. And she demanded that the broadcasters who were running it drop it. Of course, they did not. They didn't do so. The ad presented a Tucson homicide survivor telling her story about how her daughter had been stalked and then shot to death. Then the ad pretty much implied that, Martha McSally is just fine with that. Let's take a listen.
My daughter was just 19 when she told her boyfriend the relationship was over, and he got a gun and he shot her and my husband. He had threatened her before. I knew. I just knew.
Martha McSally opposes making it harder for stalkers to get a gun.
I don't think she really understands how important that is to a lot of women.
Americans for Responsible Solutions PAC approved the content of this message.
And Americans for Responsible Solutions, that's Gabrielle Giffords' PAC. Now, McSally went through the roof at the time. Her point being, how dare you say I don't oppose taking guns away from stalkers? How dare you say I'm in favor of arming stalkers? How dare you say that I'm okay with stalkers being armed? She said she's been a victim of stalking, which I don't think Gabrielle Giffords knew and her PAC knew when they were putting this together. I think that's kind of surprised them, judging by their reaction after Martha McSally brought this point up. McSally said she has been a victim of stalking herself, and she found, and that as such, she found the ad to be just incredibly offensive. Now, the ad is subject to some fair criticism. It said McSally opposes making it harder for stalkers to get a gun. That was the exact wording in the ad. And that's pretty broad because it makes it sound like McSally opposes existing background checks, and that's just not true. What the ad could have said a bit more fairly is something like this. McSally opposes one particular idea, background checks at gun shows, that might stop some stalkers from getting a gun. And there's another issue. In the criminal case that was featured in the ad, the reality of that is that no one knows or could possibly know how the stalker got the gun. So, no one knows whether expanded background checks would have prevented the particular killing that was featured in the ad that the ad makes you believe Martha McSally's okay with. Now, if this were a news story, if this were a news story, if that ad were a story instead of an ad, if it were a story presented in a newscast, it would not have passed journalistic muster. Now, that said, it was not a news story. It was a political ad. Now, McSally is firmly on record as opposing expanded background checks. Here's what she said, and this is according to the Arizona Republic article that they ran a few weeks ago. It fact-checked that ad, and here's what it said. Quote, in March 2012, McSally was specifically asked about the gun show loophole during a debate hosted by Sabino teenage Republicans at Sabino High School. The moderator asked, so I think the gun control question I'd like to ask everyone, beyond their belief in the Second Amendment, is would you support, under any circumstances, what goes under the nickname of the so-called gun show loophole, which would require private citizens to somehow get cleared before they can transfer a firearm to another private citizen? McSally's response was, she said, according to the newspaper, the question itself was flawed because that right mentioned in the question is not a loophole. It's the law, she said. She said, I mean, the law is clearly based on the Second Amendment and that we all have the right to keep and bear arms. And I have the right as a private citizen to sell my possession to anyone I want to. It's my lawful right. So just like I can sell my car, I can sell my gun. And so that's the law. And that's not a loophole. It's a freedom. And absolutely, it needs to stay that way, because any restrictions on that at gun shows or other places is just absolutely unconstitutional. Now, I contacted the McSally campaign about that ad a few weeks ago. I referenced the quote that I just read you, and I inquired about whether that quote did or did not reflect Martha McSally's current position today, in light of the fact that it was a year-and-a-half-old quote. A spokesman said he would get back to me with an update if there was one to be had, and I never heard back after that. Now, the Arizona Republic quoted the campaign as confirming McSally does favor enforcement of existing laws. In other words, not the addition of new laws. The paper then rated that controversial gun ad as true and gave it a 4-star rating. Now, that said, after McSally objected, the Giffords PAC did take down the ad. Here's what the Republic said about that. Pia Caruso, the senior advisor in gun control for the pro-gun control group Americans for Responsible Solutions, said the group's political action committee was pulling the ad because a statement issued by McSally that week had made it clear that McSally had changed her position on the issue. But the McSally campaign that same week responded that it has not changed its position on anything. Here's the spokesperson's quote to the Republic. She, meaning McSally, has always held that convicted stalkers should be prohibited from obtaining firearms in all cases. There was no change on the position of, we don't need to change the law. So what really happened here is that Gabrielle Giffords got in a good shot against McSally, but that put her in the position of not only attacking another woman, but of attacking one who'd been stalked herself. And Giffords began to see headlines calling her mean, not something you normally hear said in connection with Gabrielle Giffords. Arizona's Republic's editorial board piled on, denouncing the ad, saying the ad exploits a family's tragedy to score cheap political points. The board said that even though its own newspaper had called the ad, the board said that rather, I should say. The board said that even though its own newspaper had called the ad true. Now, note the Republic is known to skew right, so its denunciation is no surprise, and it has endorsed McSally. So, what are you left with? Of course, Martha McSally does not support putting guns in the hands of stalkers, and it's offensive to suggest otherwise. Of course it is. But she's on record as saying current background checks are enough. And her campaign insists there have been no changes in her position. Gabrielle Giffords attacked her on that stance, but withdrew the ad when her attack on a woman who'd been stalked blew up in the former Congresswoman's face, and people started calling her mean, which hurt her feelings and her image, and there you go. Now, a couple of weeks ago, this came up again. They got into this gun debate. And remember I told you they were already mad at one another because of the ad that I was telling you about. So I'm going to play a little bit from that particular debate where they sort of get up in each other's grills about gun control.
You were recently endorsed by the NRA, received an A rating from them. What, if any, limits should there be on gun ownership?
Look, there's no secret, Christopher, that I'm a Second Amendment supporter. I've shot the 30 millimeter in combat. And we can all agree that we want to and we want to make sure that gun violence obviously is addressed in our communities. And we have different ways of talking about that. But the way that this has happened in this campaign has just been disgraceful. There were ads that were run by your allies that were considered vile and nasty by the Arizona Republic. And we repeatedly asked for you to stand up against them. And Mr. Barber, you wouldn't do it. Day after day, you wouldn't do it. They finally took the ad down because it was so horrendous. And you have an opportunity now tonight to denounce that ad and apologize. Do you believe that that ad was wrong, Ron?
Now, every time she said you, she was referring to Ron Barber. And by the way, the word you missed there because of a glitch on the source from which I pulled this was minimize. Obviously, she wants to minimize gun violence. Now, when Barber finally got his chance to reply and got a chance to answer the question about whether he would renounce that ad, here's what he said.
I really want to be really clear with this question because it's very important to me as a survivor of a mass shooting, as someone who believes in the Second Amendment, supports it. And what happened to you, Martha, what you said happened to you was horrific. It should happen to no woman. I've got 2 daughters. I've got 3 granddaughters.
So
I want to make
say
sure.
wrong.
Let me finish. I want to make sure that they're protected. I want to make sure that you're protected. Every woman is protected. That ad was not run by me, and I'm not going to talk about an ad that I didn't sponsor.
All right, now having said he would not talk about the ad, he proceeded to talk about the ad by way of endorsing its sponsor, Gabrielle Giffords, who, along with Barber himself, was shot by a madman in January 2011 in Tucson.
The ad was run by someone who is highly regarded in this community and across the country for her work to prevent gun violence, and that's Gabby Giffords. But that aside, what my opponent has said is that she now accepts the notion that we should have misdemeanor stalkers prohibited from having a gun. The problem with her position is that she still refuses to say we should expand background checks.
Now, Barber went on to point out that 40% of all gun transactions take place outside of the existing background check system and said those checks need to be expanded. So, bottom line here, if you think existing gun laws are adequate and you don't want to see any new ones, vote for Martha McSally. If you think changes are needed, Ron Barber is your man. Now, I won't try to tell you how to vote on that. Both candidates are honorable people. Don't believe for a minute that Martha McSally is somehow in favor of stalkers with guns. Okay, that's not true. Both candidates are honorable. Here's my view. I support reasonable efforts to keep guns out of the hands of loons, but I am a strong supporter of gun rights. I believe a disarmed populace is an enslaved populace. That's how I see it.